First thing I gotta say is that this is actually a sponsored video. Canadian Tire sent me out a bunch of tools to try out, and I'm gonna be using a couple of them in this. But this is not gonna be a review video in any way. The tools themselves are good quality, and you'll probably be seeing them in an upcoming video because I'll likely be using them for years to come. In this video, I'm going to be making a bunch of push sticks. I've got a thing coming up on the 28th of this month. Talked about it a little bit more on the video on my other channel. If you want to check that out, there's a link in the description. Basically, I want to make a pile of these and give them away. I'll bring them along with me. Anybody that wants one, as long as I don't run out, that is. I'm going to try to get as many as I can from a single sheet of plywood. I got the two that I made before, and I'm going to try to figure out the best layout on the sheet here to get the most out of the sheet, because this is an odd shape. It's good for scraps. If you've got scraps this size, cut it out and throw the rest away. But if you want to cut it from a larger sheet, it really takes a little bit of work to figure out how to arrange them so that you don't waste so much material. So it's going to take a while to mark all these out. I'm marking them out with a pencil, which is going to be about half the time sharpening it. It's going to draw a line to guide me along that edge. Looks like I can fit one more in here. Beautiful. Well, I got 3 sections marked out. What I'm finding though is it's a little difficult to reach in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these strips off and then continue marking. That just makes, more sense. And it gives me a chance to try out this new saw. Well, I've got them all marked out. I have a total of 131 push sticks to cut out. I do it here on my bandsaw. It's going to take some time. When I was marking these out, I thought I would have trouble cutting them because there's so many lines here. It looks kind of confusing. But in reality, it's not hard at all. I'm just following the shape of the push stick on the plywood. After I got going on it, I found that cutting out 4 at a time was a little bit easier than cutting them out 2 at a time. It gave me a bigger piece that was on the table and didn't make the other end as heavy as it did the first time. So overall, just a little bit easier to cut. Well, I've got to admit that it's pretty tedious to do this, and it did take some time, although not as long as I thought it would. It went fairly quickly. I guess another way to do this that might be a little bit faster is to, rather than cut out each individual piece separately, stack them up and cut out maybe 2 or even 3 at a time. The only problem with that is that it's tough on the blade to try to make that tight radius cut. It will probably wear out the blade a lot faster. It may actually take longer to do it that way than to cut them out individually like I'm doing here. Well, like I said, it didn't take that long to do this. I'll tell you, it would be really neat if these could cut themselves out. Well, one thing I noticed after so much cutting was the level of dust in the air. My bandsaw does a good job of passively collecting the dust as it falls into this bin. But the fine stuff does get blown around and airborne, so I thought it would be a good idea to hook up the vacuum directly below where the blade comes through the table so that I can catch that before it gets into the air. So I just used a 2 1/8 inch hole saw to drill the hole. That wasn't big enough, so I had to make it a little bit larger with the sanding drum. I was wearing a respirator, and I also had my shop air cleaner on. But the best way to keep the air clean is to capture the fine dust right at the source. So I figured I'd take a few minutes and hook up the vacuum and see how that works. After that, there was quite a difference in the amount of dust that was being pumped up into the air. Well, I've got all the push sticks cut out, finally, but there's a couple other things that I want to do before I call them finished. The first is I want to stamp my logo onto them with paint. So I've got this piece of 1/4 inch MDF and I pasted on my logo, and I'm going to cut it out on the Scrollsaw. But the blade has pins in the end, so that really restricts the size, or the smallest size of the hole that you can drill to put the blade through. So to get around that, I've drawn a line across the thing here. I'm just going to cut straight through, and that'll be to get in to cut out these individual letters. After I finish cutting out the letters, I can glue this back together and finish cutting it out. Okay, well, it took a little bit of messing around with the paint because this stuff is really thick to get it the right consistency to give me at least decent results. Going into this, I knew that this wasn't going to be a very clean stamp because I had tried this before with the same results. I don't want them to look, super clean. I want them to look almost like a lumber stamp or the kind of stamp you see on a piece of meat or something like that. Very rustic, just a suggestion of the logo, that's all. So what I've got here is just a dish with a sponge in there, an ordinary sponge. And like I say, I thinned down the paint enough that I can dab this in there and get enough on the stamp so that when I put it on here and then press it down firmly, it'll result in a decent looking print. Well, I got all the push sticks stamped and I set them outside in the sun for the paint to dry. I got one more thing I want to do with these, and that's to number them. I don't think I'll be making this many push sticks at one time again, so I think it's probably an appropriate thing to do. Before I do that, I want to thank Canadian Tire for sending out the tools that I used in this project. Also, I hope to see you at the event on the 28th.